Hello and welcome to Ghosts of Dufferin County and Beyond. I'm Marianne Kennedy, your host, and we're doing another at-home edition. So I hope you're all doing well out there. We have another great episode today. I have a fantastic guest and I can't wait to tell you about him. His name is Michael Philpott, and he is a former personal trainer and health consultant, a classically trained chef, a Reiki master for over 18 years, a medium, clairvoyant, teacher, podcast host, and I think most importantly, a super nice guy. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Well, thanks. I'm glad I wrote that for you.
Well, you did a great job. Tell us, what brought you really into the world of spirit and into the world of energy?
Well, I think with most people, I was just looking for answers in my life. So my life wasn't going so well. I was trying to figure out, where am I going? What am I doing? And by chance, I like to say Reiki found me. I was in a bookstore and this book on Reiki showed up and I started reading it and it really resonated with me at the time. And I was like, what is this stuff? And I was like, okay. So I kept reading more and more and I found myself a teacher. So that really kind of led me into the whole world of energy. Before that, I had no concept of what energy was, the idea of Reiki and healing, all that good stuff. But from then, what happened was once I had my first attunement, that's when my gifts started opening up. Then it was like the Pandora's box just opened up and boom. Now, I didn't know I was psychic before, but after I had my first attunement, it went crazy. So I had to get some training because I had to figure this out. So a lot of the time, what was happening was when I was during my treatment, I would get information from people who have crossed over that were connecting with the patients. So that kind of led me into spirit and to learn about training, about getting into mediumship. And then that just kind of snowballed.
Wow, that's super incredible. And I love this story. And let me tell you why I love your story, because it answers a lot of questions for a lot of people who are having similar experiences, who are sort of newer in the journey into energy healing, maybe perhaps Reiki. When I attune students, I always say to them, the likelihood of your psychic senses expanding after today is quite high. And so don't be surprised if you start to basically engage with the world around you in a little bit of a different way, and you start to perceive things in a bit of a different way that you might not be able to explain. And I love that that's part of your experience, Michael, because it helps other people understand that often that is a part of the process. And no, you're not losing it. If after you start working with energy, also, your psychic abilities and even spiritual mediumship abilities really sort of begins to open up, because it sounds like that's exactly what happened to you. So that's fantastic. Now, you have a new podcast that has just launched, the Metaphysical Mentor, and I was happy to be a part of that show with you. Tell us about the podcast.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time. The podcast is basically, it's a great platform just to reach a lot of people. The concept behind it is providing information, and the motivation behind it is to really talk about different topics related to health and happiness, from the mystical to the metaphysical. It's just giving a broad aspect of all the great things that I've learned over the years, and hopefully I can basically give that information to people as well.
So give us a couple of examples of what types of folks you have on the podcast.
Well, it ranges. Like people like yourself, I have psychic mediums on, but I also have a lot of healthcare practitioners too as well. So they're providing, a lot of information too. So I have like naturopathic doctors, I have physicians like MDs, I have traditional Chinese medicine practitioners too as well. I have people who deal with food and diet dietitians, but I also have people too like psychotherapists. So there's a broad range. And then we have people like, doing astrology. So a lot of variety of different topics. So we go from health related, really interesting stuff, all the way to the mysticals, some of that far out stuff that people go, I really want to know more, but I'm afraid to ask about it. So we're really, bringing the two worlds together.
Wow, that's super fascinating, because I actually find that a lot of the things that you just mentioned, in terms of your guests, I find that a lot of those subject matters actually do interact with one another on a soul journey or on the spiritual journey, whether it's psychotherapy, health and medicine, acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, astrology, all of it. I find that, being connected, having outlets, having information spaces, and even support people around you on the spiritual journey that really encompass a lot of the things that you just mentioned. I find that that's a very real part of the journey. And so being able to bring those things together in one place to view, I think is really fantastic. Now, what sort of motivated you? What inspired you to put together, a podcast like this? Was it spirit guided? What was it? Did you wake up one day? What happened?
Well, to be honest with you, I was just bored.
Okay, so it was like birthed out of COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, a little bit of that, but no, actually, for the most part, it was really inspired. I had a lot of friends that had podcasts. They were doing similar stuff, and they've been encouraged me to listen, Mike. We come to you all the time for advice and stuff like that. You give advice all the time. You do through your readings and stuff like that. So why don't you just give it into a broader audience? And I thought, wow, that's really a good idea. And the really inspiration behind it, because one of the main people that's really inspired me was Edgar Casey and his work. And that's a lot of the basic premises of my show, is a lot of his work and his philosophies and ideas about health and happiness and everything else are basically what I'm trying to come across too as well in the podcast.
Yeah. Okay, great. So our viewers at home, maybe just give them a Coles Notes. Who is Edgar Casey?
So Edgar Casey was probably the forefather of all psychic mediumships or just psychic work in general. He spent a lifetime, all the information that we know about metaphysics, psychic phenomenon, past lives, all that good stuff. He was the original person that really brought it to light. And he was just a humble man that would just learned from an early age that he had these super psychic abilities, that he can communicate with source and spirit. And he's got a great foundation, and he's got a lot of information that he did. He did thousands and thousands of readings on every subject. So from, the cosmology of the soul, where we came from, to ancient Egypt, how the pyramids were built, all that good stuff. But he mainly focused on health. His health readings were probably some of the most accurate health readings in helping people heal themselves from really severe diseases.
Well, it's an interesting segue, Michael, because then that brings me to one aspect of your work that I find particularly interesting, and that's intuitive diagnosis for healthcare practitioners. Tell us what is that?
So basically, it's a combination of all the work I've done over the last 18 years. It came to fruition just not too recently. I had some people that were healthcare practitioners and found out what I was doing, and they were really curious to expand their own practice. And they're trying to figure out, because there's always an underlying issue that sometimes can't be diagnosed, and sometimes beyond the scope of the traditional diagnostic methods. So using their intuition allows them to get a greater access to what's going on within the body.
Okay, so what this is fascinating to me. So what types or kinds of healthcare practitioners come to you to learn to do this?
Well, it varies. For the most part, it's mainly naturopathic doctors, people who are doing holistic health. They kind of get the concept already. They may be even actually doing some intuitive work themselves when they're doing their diagnostics, but now they're just trying to expand it, get a little more detail, get more confidence in it. So those are the main practitioners. I don't actually work with a lot of allopathic doctors right now. They just haven't bridged that gap yet, but it's a lot easier for holistic health practitioners.
Interesting. Can you, for our viewers at home, Michael, can you give us an example of maybe a client or a patient that you've worked with in intuitive diagnosis where something came up that they previously were unaware of, and that ended up being helpful for them in some way?
Well, I have an excellent example. When I worked in I worked in a really busy chiropractic clinic, and I was actually the Reiki practitioner there. So a lot of the cases that I saw were like the extreme cases. The chiropractors and the acupuncturists, they can't help these people. And so they kind of send them to me. It's like, okay, you try to fix them. And there was a case where one of the chiropractor who did acupuncture, he says, Mike, I said, I kind of need your advice. He was a little hesitant because I was kind of woo-woo at the time, but they were very accepting. But he just thought, his own intuition says, Mike, can you help me with this? So this patient basically was suffering from sciatica. So, he did the acupuncture points, and he was kind of giving me the idea of what was happening. So the pain was switching from right to left all the time. So left side, right side, left side, right side. She was also having pains within the heart. So my intuition, what I've seen, and actually I could see what's happening with the meridians. I could actually see what was going on with the energy patterns. And from there, I just got the information. It was basically through claircognizance. I just got the information to ask her these questions. So she just recently had a baby. And again, she was having issues with money. So I basically asked her, said, so are you having issues with money right now? And are you fighting about money? And she goes, yeah, like I've been battling with my husband. The husband wants her to go back to work and she's struggling from that. So she, again, the feminine masculine energy going back and forth between the two. So there's always that battle between the masculine side and her feminine side. So that's when the energy was kind of going back and forth. So whatever side was she was more conflict with, that's the energy was being blocked. Then from there too, as well, I said, do you want to be a stay-at-home mom? And her heart chakra just opened up, and that's where she had a lot of pain in that thoracic area, and that's where all the muscles again around the heart area, and she just started bawling. And it's interesting enough, the chiropractor who was the acupuncturist, he was seeing the needles are actually jumping up and down with that release of energy. And it was those core fundamental emotional aspects that she had locked in that was causing that. So that mental strain, that fear, and that battle between, being a stay-at-home mom, which you can just feel it in her heart. Like she had so much love. That's what she wanted to do. But again, trying to, have that battle between what's going on with finances, because the husband says, I can't do this by my own. You got to go back to work. So there was that really imbalance. And then once that is, she really came to tuition and just said, you know what, that's what's going on. Like, and bang, she her pain reduced from 90% to 10%.
And so do you find, yeah, that's fascinating. Do you find then that what you're picking up in intuitive diagnosis is more in the realm of like a mental emotional block, or that being the root of some physical experience, or is it also, within the physical body that you're picking things up in terms of maybe like illness or disease that way?
Yeah, it varies. It varies. I mean, there's really depending on the individual, but there's always, for the most part, there is, strong emotional and mental aspect too as well, but also a spiritual aspect too as well. So really, really disconnect. For most health practitioners, they kind of look at three basic things. They look at the chemistry, they look at the physical and the mental, right? So they always based on chemistry. So they're looking at the chemistry. Fix the chemistry, you can fix the physical. The physical, you fix the mental. But again, the emotional and the spiritual aspects too are missing too. That's why working with holistic health practitioners, they kind of get that aspect. They usually get the three aspects, but just the other two aspects they're really missing. And sometimes those are the underlying causes that are causing the chemistry balance, because emotions are an end product of a chemical reaction of a thought. So
yeah, that's fascinating. And I think that speaks to, sometimes when we're, needing assistance on the journey, is having like a support team, holistic in the largest sense of, if a single person can't embody the investigative aspects that we need, then maybe a couple of people could handle that for us, right?
exactly.
So having a team, working with the team is really important. And that's true, I think, physically, and it's also quite important spiritually, which maybe we'll get a chance to talk about. So let's get right back into it. Michael, I want to ask you, I am quite familiar with the term medical intuition and medical intuitives. And I know, a lot of our viewers have heard of this because I've actually had guests on the show who are medical intuitives. But help us to understand, what's the difference between perhaps a medical intuitive and intuitive diagnostics or intuitive diagnosis?
So the intuitive diagnosis is for health practitioners. So people who are actually have the ability to actually treat and actually under a license to diagnose disease. So that's really different. So like a medical intuitive can actually find out what the disease is, but they can't do any treatment. So they technically really can't diagnose the problem. They can kind of say, okay, this is what I'm seeing, but they can't actually give you a solution to it. So the intuitive diagnosis is really for health practitioners, like a doctor or a naturopathic doctor, who can provide a treatment. So they can say, this is what's going on. This is how I can treat you. The other person can do basically almost the same, but they have no license to actually treat the person. That's the really big difference.
Yeah, that is a really big difference, but it also makes absolute sense when you're listening to that, right? Because I actually never thought of that would be a big difference, right? And so that's amazing. So that leads me to my next question, which is almost answered in that, is intuitive diagnosis training only for, healthcare practitioners? So for you, if you were training someone and they wanted to learn intuitive diagnosis, but they didn't have a license under something, would you work with them in perhaps a different capacity, almost like in the medical intuitive way, or do you only work with healthcare practitioners?
At this time, I'm only working with health practitioners. It just makes it a little bit easier, and there's no gray area. It's very finite. They know what the scope of their practice is, what they can and cannot diagnose, and just for legal reasons, because there is a little bit of gray area. I enjoy teaching anybody, but for the most part, this is where I find my passion is, and I really enjoy teaching them. And it's amazing because they're already kind of there anyways, and they get that information. But once you start seeing them doing it, it's amazing. And the level of skill out there, it's unbelievable. Some of the people, some of the abilities they have, it's freaky. Like, it blows me away. Like, I mean, I'm okay. I got some mad skills, but they got skills like out there. Like, it blows me away. Like, literally people I had this one person who can literally go into the organ and find out what's inside. So just like they had an x-ray of the organ, can physically, using her clairvoyancy, go in there and actually see and describe what's happening within the organ. I was just like floored.
Yeah, that's incredible. Actually, I've heard a lot about those types of gifts and abilities, where, yeah, someone sort of goes internally. So it's sort of like remote viewing within one's body, which is really, really incredible. That's really amazing. So now, if someone were interested in working with you in intuitive diagnosis training, what would that look like? Is there sort of like a curriculum, a syllabus? Like, what does that look like for someone?
Yeah, it's very, very, it's really based on their type of practice. Usually we go through an interview process, figure out, where they want to go with it, what they want to do, but it's also trying to figure out, how they receive and process the information too. What type of clairs do they have? What is their stronger points? And then we fundamentally tailor it to their specific practice. They may have a different way of the intake forms, how they intake people, how they process, how they diagnose. So we kind of tailor to that, developing ways for them to use it in their practice at the same time too, using their fundamental basic skills that they've already established too. So there's a little bit of fine tuning, but for the most part, there is basically the idea is just figuring out what their clairs are, how they process it, how can they receive the information, changing levels of consciousness. And then it's a very, very practical hands-on approach. So dealing with clients, getting them to, again, practice, and get comfortable and get the idea with confirmation too as well. So, and that's another big thing too.
Yeah, I love that it's sort of tailored to their practice, because it really only makes sense in the context in which in within which they can actually deliver it. So I really love that. Now, typically in your experience, how long does it, and I get this question all the time about, mediumship, how long does it take to get really good, to be a professional? I know, how long does it take someone to really get to where, this point where they're demonstrating to you that they're pretty accurate and know what they're doing? How long does that take somebody?
It really depends on their natural abilities and levels. Like, for some people, it could take a couple of weeks. With health practitioners, they already have the basic fundamentals of, anatomy, physiology, chemistry, things like that. So those are really simple. So when they go in and see something, I have a background in that too as well. So it just makes it easier for them to kind of go in. So just figuring out what it is. For some of them, it's difficult to get into the more emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects too as well, because they're not really practicing that. So, but chemistry, they know really well. The physical, they know really well. The mental aspects, they know, but again, it's the emotional and spiritual aspects. So they may be seeing stuff or getting information that they're not used to. So having them to practice that, I mean, it really depends on the individual. It's, it could be months, but it could be weeks too as well. Like, it just varies. I mean, I'm sure you've had students who first time they walk into your class and all of a sudden, bang, there's like, what am I seeing? They're like, oh my gosh, I see this person. Oh, I see this. What's going on? They get it so quickly. And then others, it just takes them a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Everyone really just, it's different timing for everybody. That's absolutely, it's absolutely true. And you just brought something up there, Michael, that made me think. When someone is really used to working, within chemistry or like physiology, the physical body, biology, all of those things, that though all of those sort of things are very left brain. They're very connected. They're very linear. They are very, everything is very demonstrable. A leads to B, et cetera, which can sometimes be difficult in getting that same individual to shift a little more to right brain to be able to understand things that aren't necessarily demonstrable in a mathematical way. And I find the same thing with students who are learning any type of spiritual practice. If they come from a very left brain background, often things like math, engineering, medical based, all of that stuff, accounting, et cetera, it can be difficult for them to really shift to the sort of more creative aspects to themselves, the more imaginative parts of themselves. And so I would imagine that same thing when you had mentioned, it depends how much, they're used to working in the physical body with chemistry, how long it'll take them to sort of embrace the other parts of their ability to perceive. So it sounds like you're saying the same thing, right?
It's exactly the same thing. It's like the realm of feeling and emotions. You're not accustomed to, trying to feel the energy, feel the emotion, what's coming, what's that information, and if you're one of these people, like for myself, it took me a long time to feel anything. It can be very difficult. So those are some of the things and those concepts. And again, it's very abstract. Like if you're getting, symbology is very abstract, how we perceive that information. And it's like, okay, what am I, then you get that critical analytical mind that comes in. It's like, I see a fish. What does the fish mean to me? And that's part of the process of figuring out, because every individual is going to have a different symbology. And that's part of the training we do. We figure out what their symbology is. So for example, let's say I always use an example. So, if they're during a session and my person is picking up a pizza. Now, a pizza to me is going to be different to a pizza to the person and pizza to somebody else. So if the practitioner is Italian, that could mean a lot of things. It could be, their connection to their mother, their homeland, things like that. The other aspect too is that pizza could also mean junk food, cheese, dairy, things like that. So it's developing the symbology behind that. And sometimes it's hard for them to grasp that, because that's what sometimes the symbols come up. They'll be like, I see pizza. I don't know what it means,
Yeah.
but I see pizza. But that's what we try to figure out. So once we figure out their symbology, they know right away that pizza means either gluten, or it means dairy, or it means junk food. So those are the types of things that they can look at.
Yeah, and there's so many similarities, right? When I'm listening to you, Michael, all I'm hearing is the same thing that we talk about in mediumship development. It's developing your very own personal dictionary, psychic intuitive development. It's really like what we're talking about in intuitive diagnosis is a psychic phenomenon, because we're using our psychic senses to perceive information related to a form reality, related to an actual 3D thing. And they don't all have to be 3D, but at some point they usually are or were. So it's this really cool thing, because it's the same thing, guys, right? It's like symbology. What does this mean to you? And what I really appreciate that you mentioned, Michael, is that, symbols are different person to person. And so, same thing in mediumship development, a symbol for me that someone, really cared about their appearance and took care of it will present to me in the image of red lipstick, right? And then I'll have another student that says, well, I saw red lipstick and it doesn't mean the same thing. That's right, because it's about what red lipstick means to me. It's a very personal interpretation. And so it sounds like it's the exact same thing, which really doesn't surprise me. So, one thing that I wanted to ask you is, your show, your podcast, you're bringing on a lot of great contributors, bringing a lot of information to a lot of people, which I think is like super amazing work. So, but I think what I want to ask you, Michael, is, based on everything that you're bringing together in terms of, training, your gifts, your talents, your practice, your podcast, what do you feel is really like the message of your work and what you're doing? Like, what do you want people to know?
When I heard that question the first time, when I saw it, when you came and had these list of questions, I really struggled with that. I was trying to think about, like, what does it really mean? And I was like, oh my God, I got to figure this answer out. I don't know. I'm struggling with it. But the only thing I can really comes back to is one word. It's just love. it's just love, divine guidance, just connectedness. You guys are not alone. There are people out there, they're wanting to help. They want to provide information to help you on your soul's path. That's what it's really about. And I kind of fundamentally think that it comes down to it, that we're all divinely connected. We just lost it. And hopefully through the information I provide can help you on your path to reconnect and to see who you truly are. And I think that's what it really comes down to.
I really appreciate that answer. And we actually talk about that in a number of different ways with a number of guests this season. And I just love that you just hit on that exact same thing, Michael, because what you're talking about is love and connection. And, we've talked about it before that, we can have all kinds of dialogue around consciousness and, waking up and becoming more conscious and all of those things. But what does all of that look like if we want to make it if we want to present it in its most basic form? It's about love, and that love is universally based. It's not emotionally based love, although emotional love comes into it. But that's really what it's about. It's sort of expanding our consciousness to be more love, and then being able to share that with others. So this question about, what's your message? It's something I like to ask people a lot. And I think that, it's not really for the purposes of entertainment, but I think that it allows us an opportunity to really examine ourselves. And what I really appreciate about your answer, Michael, is that when you talk about the message of your work or what it is that you're doing and what you're wanting to share is, again, it's actually about other people. It's not about, I thought this would be cool to do, and I'd like to examine this and try this for myself. This is really about service. And that's what, all of the interview guests that I bring on, and guys at home, this on Ghosts of Dufferin County and beyond, I really like to interview guests that are exceptional in the work that they do and really oriented around service. And Michael is no exception to that. And so we are going to include all of Michael's contact information throughout the show. And I know you'll find that. Michael, I want to thank you for coming on today. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I also appreciate you coming on my podcast. It's such a great conversation, and that will be up soon as well. I mean, it's fantastic. Again, the whole idea of creating community and helping each other out is fabulous. And I really appreciate you having me on today.
That's perfect. So we are signing off, guys, and we will see you next episode.